myth number 12, you shouldn't exercise or work because of back pain. Well, in fact, they have shown quite comprehensively that an early return to work and an early return to activity is much better. Periods of bed rest, complete bed rest isn't helpful. In the early stages of a back injury, it can be quite useful to modify your load or modify what you do, or periods of rest, but change is what is best. So variety, and not just staying in bed for 24 hours straight, but maybe having a half an hour and then getting up and trying to move a little bit. And these kind of decisions about when to return to work and when to return to activity and when to return to exercise aren't always the easy decisions to make, and so someone that's well informed, a health professional, can help you through that. Motion is lotion. You're going to end up in a wheelchair. Oh. The number of times you hear stories, oh, they said I was going to end up in a wheelchair. As soon as you hear that from someone, I think you can be safe in thinking that they're scaremongering. The minority of problems will end up in a wheelchair, and usually they're things that involve really nasty trauma, some spine infections, some spine tumours, but not just, not when I say just, but not back pain on its own. So if we're talking about non-specific low back pain, thankfully the amount of pain doesn't indicate that a problem is going to lead to paralysis, and thankfully the amount of pain doesn't increase the likelihood of ending up in a wheelchair. So just putting that out there, just making that nice and clear. And long-term pain indicates that the need for surgery for your back problems. Thankfully that's not true either. Yeah, in fact, the longer that you've had with chronic low back pain, the success of spinal surgery reduces. And the vast majority of people do quite well without back surgery. And there are specific situations where back surgery is indicated, but they're specific situations. So first line management should always be focused on return to function, return to activity, return to work, understanding your problem and understanding pain. I think that's underestimated. If you can understand the nature of pain and that mismatch that exists between the amount of pain and tissue damage, the fact that they're not equivalents, I think that's a really important thing to learn about. Myth number 15, we're getting there. I'm going to run over time, I'm sorry. Myth number 15, you need pain relief and you need anti-inflammatories to help it to heal. Well, you know, in fact, the drugs don't help you to heal at all. It's your body that does the healing. And even though pain relief and anti-inflammatories might smooth the ride a little bit, they certainly don't have any beneficial effect on the rate of healing. And it's also really important to remember too that the amount of healing doesn't match the amount of pain either. It's a really interesting thought. All these things that don't necessarily match up with the amount of pain that you've got. So you can have problems, for example, using the ankle sprain as an example, you can have problems that after you sprain your ankle where it's pretty good, you know, it's pain-free after a couple of weeks, but you actually know that in soft tissue healing terms, it's not yet fully healed. It's still healing to go. And the reverse can happen too. You can have a problem that you know that in terms of the rate of soft tissue healing, it healed 6 months ago, it's finished, but yet pain persists. So there's healing and pain can be mismatched as well. Okay, so this is the question. Back is in spasm because there's so much damage. Well, as I said, pain's part of the protective system. It's part of the response system, and spasm's just another part of that protective response as well. And just like pain, spasm isn't necessarily generated just based on tissue damage. So if you have an injury, or even if you don't have an injury, if your brain has this decision-making process that results in, okay, Russell needs to have a bit of extra protection, let's give him a bit of pain in that area, let's give him a bit of muscle spasm. That's all based on not just the information from the tissues, it's also based on past experiences. you know, thankfully, you know, the old brain's pretty clever, and it can think back to the last time that you lifted up that particular thing and what happened as a result of that, and act almost preemptively. You can get pain preemptively as well. So, so that's another really important thing to remember too, that there's actually a preemptive ability of the brain to generate pain, spasm, and all kinds of protective responses. It doesn't have to just rely on tissue.